Hi, everybody. This is Cindy Kennedy from Living with Lyme, and we're excited today because we have Dr. Eric Balcavage, and I always say his name like crazy, but that's really what it is. And he is the owner and founder of Rejuvigen, and that is a functional medicine practice, and he's in Chaddsford, Pennsylvania. He is a recognized speaker and educator, and he has a lot of information on various health topics. He's big into thyroid, detoxification, bowel physiology, oxidative stress, and he treats a lot of people for chronic illness. So today we're going to cover a real important fact, and that's what it is to be able to detoxify. And there's different pathways, and we're going to learn more about how we can enhance that. Hi, Dr. Eric. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. Can't beat life right now. I have a neighbor. He's an older guy, and every time I say, "Hey, Frank, how are you?" he goes, "Every day is Christmas." So I'm trying to adapt that.
Well, it's a good day. I will tell you, I am celebrating my 53rd birthday with you today. So this is a
Oh,
great birthday.
yay! Happy birthday!
I don't feel 50. I don't know what 53 is supposed to feel like, but I still mentally kind of consider myself like a young neophyte. But I did get a text from my eldest son today that said, "Happy birthday, old man." And I said, that must have been a retype or a corrected type on your iPhone. I
Absolutely.
don't represent that comment. And so he did quickly say, yes, it was a screw up on the iPhone.
Oh yeah, intended with lots of love. My husband was golfing with his brother and another broker, and they got a foursome. They wanted to put a foursome together. So this young kid joined them. He's 28, and of course we're in our 50s as well. Anyways, and so my husband must have been looking away, and the kid goes to my husband, "Okay, pops, you're up." Pops, huh?
Yeah, I like to make sure I put those people a little bit back in their place. Let them know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's dig into this. What actually is detoxification?
Well, detoxification means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but essentially, detoxification is your body's way to get rid of waste products, right? There are, depending on who you talk to, there's 3 phases or 3.5 phases or 4 phases or 5 phases, but essentially there's a couple, when I look at it from multiple different phases. One, cells have to release the toxins to get into the bloodstream. Those toxins then need to get into the liver, which is the primary site of detoxification. In the liver, there's essentially 2 primary detoxification pathways. Phase 1, which is really converting these toxic products to like a fat-soluble molecule. And then phase 2, which is the conversion to a soluble water molecule or product so that they can be pooped or peed out. And then there's phase 2.5, which was coined by Dr. Kelly Halderman, a good friend of mine and a peer of mine. She's also the co-writer or co-author of our book, Thyroid Debacle. And she coined a term called phase 2.5, which is the exiting of metabolites, detoxification products from the liver into the bile. And we know that many times, you could do phase 1 right, you could do phase 2 right, but the stuff doesn't get out of the liver, and that becomes a problem. So phase 2.5 is the opening of the doors essentially from the liver to dump things into the bile, and then the bile then transport those toxins into the GI tract. And many people call that, phase 3, which is the poop and pee process to get rid of them. It's a really kind of complicated and convoluted process. Many people think, hey, if I just take this drink I read about on a blog I can detox, right? But I think a lot of people run into problems when they do just kind of rudimentary or the detox of the month program, because they're pushing toxins into a system that's not even ready to be able to handle them, and that can create more problems for them over time.
Yeah, and you think about people with chronic illness like Lyme disease, you really need to have that pathway working pristinely, because otherwise things do build up, and it's, you know, there's raw material needed for this process, and we can get that in supplement or we can get it in food. But, you know, what do you think are the most important raw material products that you, and I don't mean like a name product, I mean just the identification of what raw materials do we need to enhance detoxification?
Well, you know, the B vitamins are important. Things that we include in the B vitamin category are things that are going to support what we call methylation, which is one of the phase 2 detoxification pathways. The other things that are really important is in the phase 2 is sulfation and glucuronidation. So those are key things that need to be addressed. Now, does everybody need to be taking supplements to force those processes? No, but it's critical that you have optimal levels of magnesium, optimal levels of energy, you have optimal levels of B vitamin. I mean, so there are a lot of things that are really important for detoxification, and the best way to support healthy detoxification, sorry about my dog.
That's okay. Obviously,
your package has arrived.
Well, probably has something to talk about. Maybe if I spoke dog, I could get something out of that.
I guarantee you there's a truck in the cul-de-sac. And unfortunately, I can't change that too much. But it's really critical. So the best thing that I think somebody can think about is, hey, I want to support my detoxification. What should I take or do? I would tell them the best place to start is not with some type of supplementation, but a healthy whole food diet, good amounts of quality sleep, good respiration, positive mindset, and plenty of hydration, because hydration is also critical to being able to produce bile to help get things out of the system. So I think before we go anywhere like supplementation wise, we consider the fact that, hey, am I doing the foundational things first, which is, am I eating a healthy diet? Are the rest of my lifestyle factors in place? And do I have a healthy gut to be able to dump all this stuff into? And if you don't have a healthy gut, then you really shouldn't be loading your body with supplements anyway, because you're not going to probably absorb those in the first place. So you want to address what's going on with the gut and address that before you really start pumping a bunch of detoxification supplements into the system.
Yeah, you know, the whole thing is there's many people out there that don't have a gallbladder, that it's been removed. Yeah. So that's an important part to support. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think bile flow is critical. I mean, Kelly and I did a whole weekend seminar for professional healthcare products on detoxification pathways. I think it was like a 3-day seminar where we broke down every step of the detoxification pathway and really got in depth with it for providers. And bile flow is key. I mean, I think you have to have healthy bile flow. And I think one of the things that happens is that people get their gallbladders taken out. Many people have to have them taken out because they're so damaged and diseased and they need to come out at that point. But the story doesn't end that all of a sudden you take a gallbladder out, now you have healthy bile physiology, because once the gallbladder is gone, you really lose a good portion of the ability to concentrate bile and actually make it very functional. And so for anybody who's had their gallbladder out, they've got 2 issues to address. One is, what caused my gallbladder to become diseased in the first place, and have I addressed that? And the second thing is, what do I need to do support-wise to help maintain a healthy level of bile flow and bile production?
Right. Because, you know, we all understand that the gallbladder is basically the sac that holds it. But when that's gone, you know, all I can think of is a leaky faucet. Am I thinking about this correctly? That you're still producing bile, but it's just kind of trickling and leaking.
Yeah. And that's what it seems to show, is that when you have once the gallbladder's out, that you don't really maintain good release of bile. So it's almost like a constant drip out of the duct that's kind of formulated or repaired. And so docs assume, like, well, okay, we've fixed the problem because the diseased material is gone. There's no gallstones that can develop in the bladder because it's not there anymore, so all is good. But the reality is that doesn't mean that the quality, the consistency, the concentration of the bile has been restored. And it also doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have optimal release into the GI tract. Right. And many times, the primary cause of the gallbladder dysfunction is never addressed. And so the same thing that's caused it to be problematic may still can cause somebody to have low bile flow into the GI tract. And the significance of that is if you don't have proper bile flow, you're going to have poor fat absorption, poor release of lipids and fats to get rid of the waste. And you need proper bile flow to maintain the integrity of the GI tract. I mean, in functional medicine, we talk about leaky gut all the time, but I don't think too many people talk about the significance of having appropriate bile signaling to maintain the tight junction. So without healthy bile flow and healthy concentrations of bile, you can lose the ability to maintain the tight junctions. And now a person has chronic leaky gut, and they're not aware of it. We don't have a leaky gut signaler that says like a light on your dashboard that comes on and says, hey, you got leaky gut. And so people don't realize, and yet they'll go through treatment methods, right? Fix my leaky gut, but you're missing this key piece, which is you don't have appropriate bile flow to maintain the tight junctions. And then the last piece of that is bile is critically important to the maintaining a healthy GI tract because it's antimicrobial, directly antimicrobial at the top end of the GI tract. The bile actually damages and destroys the bacteria as it's coming in. And then the other piece of it is it's an indirect antimicrobial at the lower end of the GI tract because as it's being absorbed, it actually releases some of the defensive properties in the bowel to go after the bacteria and yeast and other organisms in the GI tract. So it is critical to have healthy function and have a healthy 2.5 detox, and 2, to have a healthy 3.0 detox, which is the GI tract.
Right. So what do we do with people that don't have gallbladders?
Well, I typically put them on some type of gallbladder support, okay? And there's different components that can make up a bile support product, olive leaf extract, and some people like milk thistle, and there's a number of other ingredients that can be used to help maintain a healthy bile concentration and bile flow. Some people like ox bile to provide ox bile. It's different though for everybody, because for some people, ox bile can become problematic. It can be good for some, but it can also be problematic for others, because if you're taking ox bile, it can create some loose bowels if you have problems with absorption. If you're absorbing too much ox bile back into the system, that can actually upregulate the conversion of T4 to T3 and drive hyperthyroid symptoms. So I've had a number of patients who were taking ox bile, as they read in a blog or a post, and they were taking that for better bile function because they had their gallbladder removed, and they were really struggling with what we would consider hyperthyroid symptoms, and they didn't understand the correlation there. And what was happening is more bile was being absorbed, and what happens is that bile acids can bind to receptors that are called TGR5 receptors on tissues, and that TGR5 receptor increases the conversion of T4 to T3 in the cells that have that. So too much bile reabsorption or too little bile getting recycled back into the liver can actually trigger hyperthyroid symptoms. So we have to be a little bit cautious with that. The other thing that somebody's might need to be careful of is milk thistle. And milk thistle's in almost all the bile gallbladder products. It's one of the things that I'm talking to US Enzymes about, making sure that we can have maybe a product in their line that doesn't have milk thistle in it. Most people would say, why? If you look at almost every product that's in there, they look at the literature and research, it's good for detoxification. The problem is is that it can reduce the transport of thyroid hormone into cells and tissues, which then can cause a hypothyroid effect. So we have to be a little cautious. So there's lots of nice components to many bile detoxification products. I don't, there's a few out there that are that I use, but I think you probably want to work with somebody who understands biophysiology and the impact the components can have on the rest of your physiology when you're taking something. So I think this is this is one of those things where I think you're far better off finding a physician to help guide you with bile and gallbladder support when you've had your gallbladder removed than maybe just reading a blog and saying, oh, I'll take some Oxbile.
Right.
You might be okay, but it could be problematic as well.
Well, there's the problem. There aren't too many people that understand that concept or are willing to, even talk to people about some type of gallbladder support. They
Right.
say, well, you don't need it. You had a diseased gallbladder, it's gone. Just eat healthy. And yeah, eat healthy to me is completely different than eat healthy to someone else. So
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's health,
Oh yeah.
right?
Completely different to people. Yeah. Health might be, a drive-through burger that has lettuce and tomato on it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I get all my vegetables. I put ketchup on my food, right?
There you
And
go.
so,
There you go.
um,
Do you eat vegetables? Yeah. Well, let's talk about how many vegetables you eat a day. Well, sometimes I'll eat a carrot. Okay, we're starting off good. Let's start there. So
right.
you mentioned a healthy diet that's going to promote detoxification.
Mhm.
What kind of foods are in that healthy diet that's going to help us detoxify?
Well, that's another loaded subject, right? So let's assume that we're starting with somebody who doesn't really have any gut symptomatology overall, right? So for the most part, from my standpoint, in our industry, we've circled the wagons and we're shooting in, right? So the carnivore people arguing with the vegetarians are arguing with the AIP people, so there's this inward battle. But I think for the general person who's listening, the best place to start to have healthy detoxification is eat a 80% whole food diet, okay, as a starting point. So I am a firm believer that we do well with both plant material and animal material, right? Animal foods, plant foods. I have not, I think carnivore works well for people in certain situations. I think vegetarianism works well for certain situations. But ultimately, for the average person who does not want to be anal about everything they eat a whole food diet. If you're eating primarily an organically based whole food diet, and when I talk about organically based, like where the food's coming from, not that just somebody stuck a label on it, and that not every piece of food has to be organic, and there's foods that definitely should be purchased organic if you can get them, and there's things you can get away with, but eat as clean a diet as you can. If you're lucky, you have the ability to grow some of your own vegetables and do that, right? If you can raise your own chickens, great. If not, go to the local farmer who's growing those things more organically. If you have the ability to have a local person who raises animals and harvests them, buy that type of stuff, right? So buy the cleanest, most organic-ish food that you can and eat that the vast majority of the time, because all the nutrients you need for healthy detoxification are in healthy food, right? The biggest challenge is that most of the food we eat is processed. When you process the food, you kill off most of the enzymes and the nutrients. When we're buying foods from big mega farms, the soils are often depleted in nutrients and they're loaded with fertilizers and chemicals. So get as clean a food as you can. I think that's the simple place to start.
Right. There's a big push for broccoli sprouts. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think broccoli sprouts are great. I mean, that's one of my things that I really push a bit, because broccoli sprouts, which are the 3 to 5 day old growths of broccoli, are loaded with a product called, can produce a product called sulforaphane. So they're loaded with an enzyme called myrosinase and another product called glucoraphanin. And when those little broccoli sprouts, when you crunch them in your mouth and you break them down, they produce a product called sulforaphane. And sulforaphane is one of the best foods that we can eat that helps stimulate our antioxidant, our anti-inflammatory, and our detoxification pathways. The sulforaphane actually pushes a pathway in the body called NRF2, and NRF2 is the master detoxification, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory system in the body. So one food, that broccoli sprout, can produce enough of this sulforaphane to stimulate that NRF2 system and keep it functioning appropriately. So that's one of the best things that I recommend to continue to support detoxification naturally.
And as well, any cruciferous vegetable is going to help in that direction, correct?
Yeah, there's a difference between the sprout component and the full plant component. Like somebody would say, well, I don't eat the sprouts. They're expensive to buy them, and it's a pain in the butt to grow them. Why can't I just eat broccoli? You can, but the concentration of sulforaphane that you're potentially going to get from some raw broccoli is about 100 times less than what you're going to get in a small amount of broccoli sprouts. So the sprouts of the cruciferous vegetables are going to be a much higher concentration than the plant. And once you start cooking the plant, you're going to lose a lot of that component as well.
Right, right. And that's critical. The sprouts, they are expensive, but I think what you're saying is that you need a few sprouts. You don't need a bunch of sprouts in your salad. What do you?
I think we're still trying to figure out what the optimal amount is for people. But you can definitely, if you were growing them at home, right? I would say that if you took your fist and you had like a fist's worth of sprouts that you could consume in a day, you'd probably be like hitting optimal levels of sulforaphane. Now, is the average person going to eat that much? I don't know, but could you do it? Absolutely. Are you going to do that efficiently from the grocery store and buying your sprouts from the local, whatever the grocery store is? Probably not. And the reason for that is when food is, when they get it, they harvest it, they package it, ship it off. Those 3 to 5 day old broccoli sprouts aren't going to hold up long. They're pretty delicate. And as soon as those sprouts start to break down, the sulforaphane is produced and it's gone. And so I don't think you get as much value as buying your sprouts that are in a carton or something at the grocery store. Definitely, if they're a little wet and slimy, they're already starting to break down. You probably shouldn't be eating them. I think the best way to get them, if you're going to eat the actual sprout, probably the best way to do that is to grow them at home. And you can grow them in trays, or you can grow them in mason jars in your kitchen window. They're super easy to grow. And probably the best thing to do if you're really into it is get 1 or 2 mason jars and grow your broccoli sprouts, and just within 3 to 5 days of sprouting, they're ready. You just take a handful out, throw it in your salad. Take a handful out, throw it as a garnish on whatever you're eating. And if you do get in the habit of doing that, you're probably going to get a good amount of sulforaphane into your diet to support the detoxification pathways and the anti-inflammatory pathways.
Yeah, and I've read a little bit more of the research that's going on about it working as an anti-cancer type of product.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more research come out at it. NIH has been probably the leader on the research department as far as sulforaphane. And there's a lot of research undergoing and what's the benefit of it. But I think the reason it's being looked at as an anti-cancer product is because of not that from its direct input, but the impact it has on this NRF2 system to calm inflammation, to reduce the oxidative stress, and to help support detoxification. The nice thing about the sprouts is when you're getting sulforaphane, it's highly absorbable. and it can get into the system. And I think research shows that within 15 minutes of consuming it, they've showed it actually hitting the brain, which is pretty
Wow.
awesome. So it doesn't take long for it to be absorbed and get to the tissues, and it has a very short half-life. So it doesn't hang around in the body very long, which is good and bad. The good part about it is it's hard to become toxic with it. The bad thing is if you want to have the benefit, you probably want to take it fairly consistently.
Right, right. There's some additional research with autism and sulforaphanes. And, I mean, especially if you say it's getting right into the brain, it's got to be providing some detox measures there as well.
Yeah, same thing. It's going to support detoxification, anti-inflammatory. It's going to upregulate NRF2. So it's going to have a benefit. I'm seeing the same thing in the literature and the research from the autistic, research community. And I think what we see with these kids that have autism is there's a big inflammatory component, and anything that we can do that can work to support the anti-inflammatory pathway without inhibiting any of the other pathways is
Right.
really important.
Right, right, right. Yeah, you have to think about that the whole way. Can you define oxidative stress for everyone? I think that's a term that people hear, but are not clear on what that is.
Yeah, so almost normal metabolism, just the normal operations of the cells and tissues produces like waste products that we call free radicals, okay? And these are things like that are waste products that can create some type of damage, okay? We call them oxidants. The body, in its ultimate wisdom, produces a whole bunch of chemicals that are antioxidant. And so we should be making some oxidative free radicals or oxidants, and we should make enough antioxidants to balance that out so we don't have an overload. When the amount of free radicals or oxidants overwhelms the amount of antioxidants we produce, that creates damage to tissues, and that's what we call oxidative stress.
All right. Is that similar to something like lactic acid buildup when people are over exercising?
I would say not necessarily from a lactic acid standpoint, but I'd say it's a similar concept or similar idea.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, people ask, more about that. And, it's unfortunate that we deal in this environment now that's so much more toxic than our ancestors did, and you're hearing more and more about the environment really affecting our health because it's in the there's pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers and all kinds of things that are leaching into water, and certainly the soil, and the soil being devoid of a lot of minerals, and then it's in the air we breathe. And I read something recently about a brand new baby, a newborn, and the amount of chemicals that are in their umbilical blood. So we really have to concentrate on getting rid of toxins out of our body. And do you think of, outside of your food and your water, what other things do you help people so that they can detoxify better?
Well, definitely we have to look at every aspect of the environment and try and control it as much as possible. Definitely air quality is a huge issue. In some parts of the country, it's a massive issue right now. So
Oh,
making
exactly.
sure we have appropriate air quality, and home filtration is one of those things. If you're in your car a lot, you want to make sure you have good filtration in your car as well. So air filtration becomes important. Definitely looking at water systems and what we're getting in from the water. I typically recommend that they can go to ewg.org, they can go to their clean water guide, they can put their zip code in, and they can take a look at what's in their local water supply, because that's really important. Because you may say, well, I have a Brita filter and I filter my water. Well, what are you filtering, right? Well, I don't know. Well, maybe it's important that you know what's in your water and what your filter does to make sure those two things match. And EWG can help you with that. If if you don't, if you have a lot of money, you can get a whole house filtration system and a remineralizer, and that's really important as well. Because when you filter your water, especially if you're doing like reverse osmosis water, which takes almost everything out of the water supply, it also takes the good minerals out of the water supply as well. So you have to work on remineralizing as well. But if that's not cost effective, then you can get like an under the sink system that can filter your water. Then you use that for drinking and cooking purposes. And if that's out of the budget, then there are like simple on the counter or on top of the counter or pitchers for the refrigerator, or even filters for your refrigerator that you can get. And while they may not be optimal, anything that you can do to lower that load becomes really important.
Yeah,
Then,
that's important. That's good. And there are different levels. It's not like it has to be the best of the best, and that you end up with not being able to afford good healthy food if you buy the top of the top. But again, simple filtration is certainly important. Since you are a big leading expert on the thyroid, sluggish thyroid, sluggish everything. So if we have all of these things working appropriately, and we are now putting all these toxins into the bowel and certainly into the kidneys for filtration, let's just go to the bowel now, and you're not pooping, we got a problem, right?
yeah, if you can't move the things through the bowel, I mean, that becomes a huge issue, because now those toxins are in the GI tract. Some of those toxins get reabsorbed. Some of the bacteria in the GI tract can produce enzymes that actually unwrap the toxins and allow them to be recycled back into the system. So yeah, you have to make sure each phase of that detoxification system, from entry into the liver to exiting from the bowel, works, or otherwise you're going to potentially have challenges. Thyroid physiology plays a huge role in bowel function and bowel motility. And when we talk about hypothyroidism, we talked about this, I think, on an earlier podcast of yours, that we have to consider that, at least from my perspective, I would say, is that when we're exceedingly toxic, the toxicity can trigger a danger response. The danger response then triggers the deactivation of thyroid hormone. And that can make a detoxification process even harder, because once thyroid hormone is deactivated in the peripheral cells, especially the GI tract, we lose stomach acid production. We lose the ability to have healthy bile. We may lose the production of optimal pancreatic enzyme production. We lose the motility in the GI tract, which exacerbates the problem. So sometimes we consider which came first, the chicken or the egg. Did the hypothyroidism cause the constipation and liver and gallbladder problems that caused the toxicity issue, or did the toxic load over time cause the cell danger response and cause the deactivation of thyroid hormone, trigger autoimmunity, and then primary hypothyroidism? The answer is, I don't know, but it really doesn't matter. But the issue is, whichever it is, both have to be addressed. So we have to reduce the load, and we have to get that body out of a cell danger response so that thyroid physiology can start to function appropriately. And then as we get the thyroid physiology to improve naturally, then the detoxification gets better. So you can't address one without addressing the other.
Right. And inflammation, it definitely starts in the gut, but people are walking around with a lot of excess weight. Their blood sugar regulation is poor. Mm-hmm. Their cholesterol levels are higher than they should be. They're probably eating too many carbohydrates, or triglycerides are up. They need to know that is inflammation, and it's certainly a problem. About 45% of all United States people are carrying around one or more chronic illnesses, and people don't think that their weight is associated with a chronic illness, and it really is. And I read from the Mayo Clinic that only 3% of the population can actually be listed as healthy. That is frightening. And also that chronic illness is becoming a problem in pediatrics. So, it's hard. People get stuck, and it's really hard to make a change because they don't see the benefits. And they either get scared, they get a wake up call, whatever the case may be. But it's very hard sometimes to help people make those changes. And, you're dealing with people with chronic illness. Do you find that the case for you too?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple major issues. One of those is we don't have a great definition of health. And so that's a huge issue. Even when you say that, the statistic, the next thing is what are they using as a definition of health, right? So that's a concern, because you ask 10 people what health is, they'll say, well, I don't know, it's a state of well-being. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it's a state of being healthy. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's a state of being well. Okay, well, what does that mean? You can't use the same term to define itself. So that's a problem. The second thing is that we have people, I think we're so sensitive now to offend anybody and to say that if you're overweight, you're unhealthy. People are like, well, my doctor, I'm overweight, but my doctor says I'm healthy. Well, A, that's not necessarily true. And B, we're afraid to offend everybody. So if you say, hey, they're overweight, they're unhealthy, now we have we live in this culture where that's offensive, and you shouldn't be able to say that, and that's mean-spirited or whatever. And the reality is it's just what it is. I think the third piece of it is that we often blame people for being overweight or being unhealthy without giving them the right understanding of what health is and how you get unhealthy. And so a lot of times when we're talking about obesity and we're talking about elevated cholesterol levels, we can say, okay, part of that is an unhealthy lifestyle. And you would say, well, doesn't everybody know they need to exercise or be physically active, or they shouldn't eat junk food? And the answer to that is, you would think, but some people just assume that that's what it is. They watch TV and they're drummed in that this is all healthy food, and it's fine. McDonald's French fries are just potatoes, right? That's all it is, and fried in some stuff. Nobody told them there's 18 ingredients in a McDonald's French fry. When I make French, yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, so they make a slurry with these 18 ingredients and then form them into a fry form, and then those are the fries that then get cooked. So you don't need, a potato is a potato, maybe some salt, and then you fry it in some oil or bake it or whatever you want to do. But there's really two ingredients, right? Potato, salt. The third ingredient is something to cook it in, right? You don't need 18 ingredients. So there's part of our problem.
That's sad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we don't know how toxic our food is, right? Marketing is fantastic. Food marketing is one of the best marketing companies that, whoever's doing food marketing is doing a fantastic job. But the issue is, when we see somebody who's overweight, we kind of default to that thing like they're not eating well, they're not exercising well. And if you take care of people with chronic health conditions for a period of time, you quickly learn that many of the people that are chronically unhealthy, that have chronic health issues, that have thyroid issues and GI issues and other immune and autoimmune disorders, a lot of them are exercising. A lot of them are eating fairly healthy food. And what they just don't realize that it's not just a food in, calories out thing that's causing their obesity. It is your total load of stress. And whether that comes from toxins, whether that comes from disrupted sleep, improper breathing, emotional stress, previous trauma, medications, antibiotics, it's the load. And so when you have this load and it induces this cell danger response, then a number of processes kick in that are going to cause a patient or a person to become insulin resistant and store fat. They're going to deactivate thyroid hormone in their tissues, which is going to lead to problems with detoxification at the liver. It's going to cause their cholesterol levels to rise because they can't get cholesterol into the liver because they have tissue hypothyroidism. The docking system doesn't work. Cholesterol can't dock and get pushed into their bile flow. And so they wind up with increased fat, increased cholesterol. So to some degree, the person has to own the issues that they aren't doing well. But we as physicians, and especially us in the functional health community, we have to be aware that, hey, the person may be doing a lot of things right, but their physiology is working despite them doing those things. And we really need to help them figure out what's creating that stress load. What is it? The toxicity? Is it organisms? Is it all those other things we talked about that are contributing to it? And maybe people just aren't aware. I mean, you get a glass out of your dishwasher, right? And it's still got, if you're using traditional dishwasher tablets, that's loaded with chemicals that destroy your gut flora. So now every day you're eating your food from clean glasses, dishware, silverware that still has residual from your dishwasher cube. And now you don't realize, but that's disrupting your gut flora. Now you disrupt your gut flora. Now you get dysbiosis. Now you lose the ability to detox through that 3.0 pathway. You get increased inflammation. Now you start putting on weight. Now you lose your first phase insulin response. You become insulin resistant. And now you're on your way to diabetes and fatty liver. And it may have had nothing to do necessarily with what you eat, but what you are mysteriously putting into your system and you didn't even realize.
Wow. Okay. That's really that's a mouthful.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's wow. Oh boy. I get rid of my cubes, I guess, right?
Or get healthy ones. I mean, there's plenty of companies out there that make clean ones, but who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that the thing that you use to clean your dishes could be one of the big things that's creating chronic bowel problems?
Yep.
I mean, you wouldn't have thought. You would have thought, why would they let us use a product to clean our dishes if it could be harmful to the gut flora? And to a large degree, nobody checked, right? But now there's papers out there showing that, hey, this stuff can damage the flora. And as you said a couple times already, the gut is so important for our overall health and our detoxification. And man, if you're every day, you're just creating a little bit of distress, a little bit of problem by what you're doing.
Right.
Over time, that adds up to be a big issue.
Right. It's so hard for people to wrap their head around it. Number one is because this is the way it's always been. This is the way they've grown up. They kind of replicate what happened in their, young adult years, even their childhood, and they go on. And yeah, well, my mom got XYZ soap, so I'm going to do the same thing because that's the way I grew up. But again, there's a lot of hidden things, and because it's not regulated, all this stuff is not regulated, we inadvertently pose some hazards to ourselves, and that's an unfortunate thing. And getting people to buy in and understand this sometimes is hard because they can purchase something at the grocery store for little money when they want to go to a company that really supports healthiness in terms of reducing toxin exposure. It's a lot more money. And that's where the money is driving things, especially, right now we're in the midst of COVID. Many people are out of work. Many people are, struggling because they don't know what's going to happen next. And so the concept, it can be very overwhelming for people. My website, pursuewellness.us, we actually, for those people that sign up for our newsletters, we have a how to reduce toxin exposure. And, putting that together was kind of a big wake up call. All these things that I knew, right? I mean, I knew these things, but then when you write it on paper and you're presenting this to someone, some people are taken aback. And then I just say, you know what? You got to, it's small baby steps. You got to do one thing at a time. And, I guess you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Well, I think we all live in this we're all a little bit naive, right? And if this current state hasn't taught anybody anything, is we don't get the truth very often from our governments, our manufacturers, and so you would think, I think most people think, well, of course, nobody would allow a dishwasher cube to be released if it could create some harm. Well, who's checking, right? Who's checking that? Nobody. Who would make a pan? Why Teflon can't cause a problem, because we wouldn't make a pan with Teflon if it actually came off and created health problems, right? We wouldn't be putting breast implants in somebody if we knew that they created a toxic syndrome, right? We wouldn't give people antibiotics if they were potentially harmful to the gut. I mean, wouldn't somebody have stopped that? And the answer to that is no. Companies make products to solve a problem, and if it solves that one problem, then it usually moves forward. And it's not until somebody starts questioning it, and this is pretty much with everything, the first person to start questioning things is considered the quack, right? The oddball, the weirdo. Oh, they're just out there woo woo, right? And then the longer that kind of conversation continues, then it starts to trickle down. More people start to have the conversation. And then what typically happens is somebody in a higher state that was poo-pooing that conversation before, but has a better name, champions the idea, and now everybody starts to take notice. And we see that quite a bit when we've been, especially in the functional medicine model, we talk about things. We talked about leaky gut syndrome. We talked about gluten intolerance and a bunch of these terms for years, long before some of the medical doctors finally got frustrated with what they're doing, came to functional medicine, started championing the ideas of functional medicine. And now you have this medical doctor who's now known for, he's the gluten guy, or he's the guy who figured this out, or he's the guy who figured out that there's such thing as leaky gut. And you're like, no, these have been principles that have been taught in functional medicine for 2 decades. Somebody else with just a higher, more mainstream, maybe initials after their name, has championed the idea. But typically, the first people who start out talking about the potential dangers of, the toxins in your mattress. Oh, those don't. I mean, they can't create a problem. Those things are there in case you catch on fire when you're smoking your cigarette in your bed, right? I mean, nobody would have imagined that the chemicals in your bed that you stick your face into for 6-8 hours a night could potentially be harmful to your health. But now we have plenty of documentation to show that's a problem. So I think the big issue is we as a general population are naive. We're educated by TV commercials many times, and media and posts that are paid for by the people who are promoting the product, not independent people. And as you well know, in the industry, if you have a product and you don't want the negatives to come out, you just hire the right scientist or professional to do what you want to do, and you can pretty much hire anybody to say what you want to get your product through. So that's a huge issue. So it leaves people really confused as to what to do. And the other thing is the industries also start going, well, let's just throw natural on everything. That'll fix it, right? It's a natural product, but it's terribly toxic, but we're not gonna talk about that part. We're gonna talk about the fact that it's natural, right? And everybody assumes that if it's natural or has natural on the label, it must be good for you. And so it's confusing.
Right. It's almost like you have to re-educate people all over again, but you have to do it in a step-by-step process, or people just get too overwhelmed and they just throw their hands up and they'd rather not deal with it. I'll just go back to the old way. And I love the line, well, you got to die from something anyway.
And you are. It's just going to be, what state are you going to be in and how long is it going to take you to die, right? I always say, listen, when I'm ready to go, I want to go quick. The problem we have in this country today is, we have lifespan that we've defined, right? We have your health span, and then you have your disease span or illness span. And it used to be that like the lifespan's been about 80 years plus or minus for, decades now, right? The problem is the health span was 70 years, and that disease span or sick span used to be like the last 10. The problem today is we're still living that same duration. Actually, it's come down. I think the last 2 years, the lifespan is actually reduced. But the problem is that our disease span, the sick span, is almost 30 to 40 years now. And so you have people have maybe a healthy 30 to 40 years versus a healthy 70 years. And so that concept, like you're going to die of something, yeah. But do you want to be struggling for the last year or two, the last 10 years, or the last 30 years? That's a big difference.
Right, right. That's a lot of that's a lot to swallow. No, no pun intended here, but that's a lot of information. And you know, I hope people just understand that we learn more things, but keeping an open mind is certainly important. And if you're not familiar with any of these concepts, you have to actually look for the answers, or you talk to the people who are, you know, educated in this field and have really done their research. And that's what's really important. And people have to, they have to define their own health as to what they want it to be. And I'm glad you're doing your work, because certainly it's important on multiple levels. And people find you and they find me and they know that it's different. It's not going to be pulling out a prescription pad and writing a prescription right away. It's really looking at that upstream and those root causes for illness. And yeah, I thank you. I thank you. I think this has been incredible. I'm ready to go home and throw out my little pods and yes, start working at something else and looking at. And you know, you did mention the environmental working group, and that's ewg.org. Tons of information there. So that's great. I'm actually floored at some of the things that we talked about, but I do know about my broccoli sprouts, and I think I have them in my lunch today.
Yeah, great key. And if you can get them in the system, especially if you can grow them, they're super cheap to grow.
Yeah.
So, simple techniques. And I
Great.
think, to finish up for the listeners, as you said, this is a lot to think about, but all you got to do is really tackle one thing at a time. And I know that's what I do with my patients. I'm sure you do with your patients. When somebody comes to us for help, there's 15 or 20 things that probably need to be addressed. But what I try and do, and I'm sure what you try and do is just take it one step at a time. Let's work on a strategy, do that for a few weeks. Now we can layer on another strategy. When you do it incrementally, it doesn't seem as much like a burden. You start to develop new habits and new behaviors that make this process easier and easier and easier. But if you look at it like, oh my gosh, I got to change all my cleaning products, my house products, my bedding, all that, it becomes overwhelming and you would throw up the towel. So my suggestion is for the listener, if you've got chronic health issues and you value your health and you want something other than more medications added to the list, and you really want to get healthy, not just manage your disease, then you want to look for a functional medicine practitioner. And really what you want in your functional medicine practitioner, from my perspective, and I'm sure your perspective, is you want somebody who's going to not try and say, hey, here's 40 things to do and I'll see you in 3 months, but somebody who's going to help walk you through the step. That's almost like a life coach as well, to help you with all different aspects of your life, because the stuff that you can work on your own, away from supplements, those things are important, dietary stuff, but the lifestyle factors are the things that are cheap, are almost free, but virtually get ignored. And if you work on those things with the help with somebody like a functional medicine practitioner, not only do you have the benefit of changing those things now, but those are long-term strategies to improve your health. But they take work, at least in the early going. It's much easier to swallow a capsule, but that doesn't provide long-term health. That's just a management tool.
That's good. You said it very, very well. I wish I had that on record on my phone so that I could play that for some of the people that come and see me. So that's been wonderful. We have been talking with Dr. Eric Balcavage, and he is located in Pennsylvania. You can look him up. All of his information will be on the website for his bio and how you can contact him. If you're looking for me, you can find me www.pursuewellness.us. And you've been listening to another episode of Living with Lyme. We're so excited to educate you and try to make you more healthy, at least get you on the right track. For everybody, take good care. Wonderful. I'm still recording.